But the truth is, my landlord has the protections to be able to make this sustainable. He is able to pass down to me any increase in taxes that he gets from property taxes. He's able to, after I'm gone, to increase the rent by 25%. Why would they want to raise the rent by an unlimited amount? If they keep saying that they don't want to kick anybody out, they don't want to pressure tenants into leaving, then why the rush for the ability to raise the rent as much as they can after a tenant leaves? There's a big takeover of corporate landlords, and corporate landlords don't care who is the tenant. Let's be honest. We've all gone through those big rent increases or seen those rent increases for our neighbors. If the notion is, listen, now when you kick them out, you can increase the rents, increase your profit by so much more at a ridiculous percentage, like the corporate lobby said, increase it by 100% after a tenant leaves. You don't think they're going to have an economic reason to instigate and push tenants out of their homes? Yes, they will. They have. The fact that by raising the rent on rent control units, that gives permission to the market rate units, the ones that are not under rent control, to say, well, if the older units, the ones that are older than 30 years since being constructed, are raising the rents, then we can raise the rents too. So this impacts all the tenants, whether you're in the rent control unit or not. You have your church towers, you have your clock towers, you have your Marine View Plazas of the world here in Hoboken. And yes, it's all out for grabs. They're coming after all of us. That's why we're all showing up. When they come after one of us, we all show up. That's the Hoboken way. Hi everyone, welcome to the Change Podcast. My name is Ron Bautista. I'm your host, and today we're gonna talk about rent control in Hoboken. So I was born in Ecuador, but I was mostly raised here in Hoboken. I went to Hoboken High School, as many of you know, and I've been living here since 1999. I have made roots here. I've made a family here. My mom still lives here in Hoboken. I have many friends, many people who I went to high school with, many people who I go to church with, many people who I've met along the way. And something that really has kept more closely knit community has been rent control. And many people don't know that they are protected by rent control. And rent control really is a law that's in the books that basically says you cannot raise the rent more than a specific amount. And why is that important? Well, many of you may have, regardless of income, may have come across rising rent hikes across Jersey City, Hoboken, actually all across the country. We've come across with those issues, and people getting their rents raised 20%, 30%, $1,000, $2,000. And it really comes to the question of how do you overnight, because when the time comes, maybe around the 10th month, before 2 months before your lease is up, you have to renew your lease. And then when your landlord or your corporate landlord, because there's a lot of those nowadays, they tend to raise the rent disproportionately. Many buildings, the buildings in Hoboken in particular, if they've been around for more than 30 years, or there's also very specific designations if they haven't done the right paperwork from the beginning to be exempt from rent control, they have some rules that basically you can, when year over year in Hoboken, they cannot raise the rent more than the consumer price index, right? It's pegged to inflation, right? And so, give you an example, I live in a 2-bedroom apartment that I'm living with my 2 daughters. One is 6, the other one is 1 year old, my wife. And in this 2-bedroom apartment is rent control. And I paid $2,600 a month. I'm being very transparent here. And so before that, I also live in a rent control apartment in Hoboken, a 1-bedroom. And it is so tough to find affordable apartment units for young professionals, for people making a decent salary, that I found myself very fortunate to have found this rent control apartment unit in the market. And now you may think, well, $2,600 is not that cheap. Well, in here in Hoboken, it is a lot more affordable, right? But the big difference is, for example, other apartments which were not, or there's still litigation around whether or not they are rent control apartment units that have corporate landlords. They have raised the rents by $2,000. They don't cost $2,600. It costs way more than that. And young professionals, people who have a good income, were struggling in the past few years, and many of them still do. And so there is really an imbalance when it comes to the relationship between a landlord, especially a corporate landlord, and a tenant, right? There was the referendum that I was talking about today. Really was pushed forward by a lobbyist of corporate landlords in Hoboken. He actually makes a living going around all over New Jersey pushing for this agenda. If they tell you this is for the small landlords, it's not. If it was by struggling landlords, they wouldn't be paying this much money for a referendum. So really the law that they're proposing on this question is to change rent control, right? And so basically abolish rent control in terms of vacancy. Right now, at this moment, there are a lot of benefits for landlords. Some of the benefits are, if there's a increase in taxes, they can pass that down to the tenant. So the reason in terms of there's a lot of taxes, that's not an excuse to push this changes to rent control. The changes to rent control that they're pushing for is, if a tenant leaves, we want to raise the rent as much as the market can bear, as much as we can possibly. Now, you may say, well, it's the market, why not? Well, I ask you the other way around. How would they feel if the government, the city, raised the rent, they raised the taxes, the property taxes, for as much as the market could bear? I wouldn't think that would be fair, And many times, landlords and tenants, right? Because, like I said earlier, the property taxes, when they increase them, it gets passed down to the tenant, like myself. When they want to increase the property taxes by 5%, right, or by 4%, we're like, wait, let's take it easy for a minute. Let's see if we can cut back a little bit, right? That's always the notion. But imagine, before the referendum, they wanted, the corporate landlords, the lobbyists wanted to be the ability to raise it up to 100%. That means that it could double my rent, right, from one tenant to the other. You may say, well, that's for future tenants. That's not for right now. That's not true. If that was the reason, right, because that's what many of them will say in terms of the corporate landlords, they say, we don't want to kick anybody out. But that's the only reason why you're doing it, for when somebody leaves. And when you increase the benefit of getting a tenant out, then that increases something that we have seen over the years in Hoboken. I'm old enough to remember my friends that graduated high school with me getting kicked out because of the instigation of a landlord. And so Of course, it's not all of them. Just like, of course, there are some renters who are able to pay, right? The market rate. But, there are occasions that not. So just how there's occasions, and that's what the law is there for, right? The law is there to protect in case of abuse. Just how there is a law to protect in case somebody's not able to pay market rent. Now, they're not operating at a loss, the landlords, the corporate landlords. Because if they were, they can petition changes, right, to how much they charge in rent. So that way because it doesn't make sense for them to operate at a loss. But again, we just want to make sure that there's a fair relationship between the tenant and the landlord. The lobbyists had, on the corporate landlord side, had the notion of saying that basically they want to open it up so the tenants can negotiate freely with landlords. I don't know about you, but I don't remember the last time somebody negotiated their rent. You don't show up to a landlord and say, how much is the rent? $2,600? I'll pay $2,000. They just go to the next tenant, right? The next renter. Why? Because there is a need for housing. Housing is not an iPhone. Housing, an apartment, a community where you live at and you grow up, and where you have built your social capital, your relationships, where you have family nearby that can help out with the kids. I mean, that's my mom right now. She lives 20-minute walk from us. All that proximity, all those benefits of community, that's not a car. It's not something fancy. It's not like I'm picking between two different phone companies, right? It's people's livelihoods. It's really it's the difference between a longer commute versus a shorter commute, and those commutes really have a big impact, right? It means if you have a longer commute, it means you are farther away from family. You can't come back home earlier to help out with the kids. You can't. You spend more money as well. So, there is no elasticity when it comes to housing, and we are in a housing crisis. That's one of the biggest topics of conversation right now. There's a Councilman Presenzano, that when at Marine View Plaza, they were gonna raise the rents by 15%. He jumped at the occasion because it was during the campaign. He was running for his first election, and said, "This is outrageous. How could they?" Well, the corporate landlords, they opened it up before they put this referendum. They put a law which said, put it up for a vote. They wanted the city council to vote on it. That they can say, well, this is a compromise. Instead of us having unlimited rent hike when a apartment is vacant, we can raise it 50% if it's been around, if the tenant has been there 5 years, or 100% if a tenant has been around for, I think it was more than 8 years. Now, doubling the rent, when, mind you, the corporate landlord and the landlords, they're able to raise the rent by CPI, by consumer index, right? By inflation, by property tax increases. They can increase it based on, if they're in a bad situation, right? There's specific situations that, because if they're struggling, they're able to increase the rents. They're allowed to increase the rents. And also, if tenant leaves, they can increase it by 25%. So I come back again. Why would they want to be able to raise the rent at an unlimited amount, whatever they want, if it's not to get those tenants out so they can charge more money. If they didn't care, if they didn't want to kick out or get the current tenants out, then why would they want this vote? In their actions, you're able to notice what is their actual intention. Also, there is that incentive, even if it's a good landlord. I've seen it a dozen times, that in my personal experience, the landlord, who's a great landlord, sells the apartment or sells the building, and then a corporate landlord comes in, and the corporate landlord doesn't have a face. They just have people that work for them that have to follow orders, and then the instigation begins. So again, protections are built to make sure in the future for this type of situations that the tenant is not left alone, and so that way there are fair rents that are being charged. And so I'm all for fair rents. I think those rent hikes that we have seen across, I mean, listen, 70% of Hoboken is renters, is tenants, and there was plenty of people by the way, there's also the fact that by raising the rent on rent control units, that gives permission to the market rate units, the ones that are not under rent control, to say, well, if the older units, the ones that are older than 30 years since being constructed, are raising the rents, then we can raise the rents too. That's the market, right? It's what we have to, the consequences that we have to tell. So this impacts all the tenants, whether you're in a rent control unit or not. So you could think, if you don't care about the senior citizen who's on a fixed income and who cannot come up with 20% more money for rent because that's it, they're retired, or you can think of the family who is paying a good amount of rent, like mine, and then tomorrow my landlord for the next unit, they can think of, hey, I'm gonna raise it by $1,500 more, $2,000 more. We're all complaining about inflation, complaining righteously, in the right way. It has been tough. This would create inflation in Hoboken, and the notion is already that rent is really high in Hoboken, and we have rent control. Imagine when we don't. So a lot of it is at stake here in Hoboken, and we have for the first time we have come together as tenants. For the first time, let me rephrase. For the first time as a political action committee, tenants came together, created one for the election. There have been plenty of activists, advocates that have been fighting off referendums along the decades. So shout out to them. They have been around and they have been pushing the agenda of protecting tenants for a long time. I'm saying that the coalition has been broader, and they'll agree with me that they were really excited when how much the coalition has broadened up. We're a big tent, right? People from all walks of life, and we're organizing to get out the vote. So they're organizing, canvassing, door knocking all over Hoboken. They're getting the word out. They printed out flyers. They printed out posters. They're having conversations with neighbors. Really, so it's called. Oh, and by the way, it's called Hoboken Tenants United. Hoboken United Tenants. It's called Hoboken United Tenants, And this group of people are amazing. And, the focus of this podcast is the change that we want to see in our communities and those people that are making it happen. So shout out to this diverse group of Hoboken neighbors, and that's their phrase too, is Hoboken United Tenants, powered by neighbors. And that's it. It's hard to organize in Hoboken. It's hard to organize to protect your neighbors, to protect ourselves, and really to fight off something as unfair rent hikes by $1,000, $2,000 per month from one year to another. We want to be able to prevent that. We want to make sure that we are a community where people of all incomes, all ages, all abilities are able to grow here, to spend their time here, to pray here, to play, to be involved, to walk our streets, to eat at our restaurants, to really bring this community to life. I mean, listen, I live right next to Bue. Bue is the coffee shop that's on 10th and Washington Street. And some people might say, you're revealing too much in where you live. Well, my information is already out there. Might as well just be transparent about it. So what you see is a group of neighbors just every morning, just, relaxing outside, having conversations, saying hi to the kids that are going to school. And that's the character of Hoboken. It's not the buildings. The buildings help. The architecture helps. The streets, the restaurants, they help. But really what makes Hoboken an amazing place, it's the people that you meet. It's the ability to raise a family here too, if that's what you're aiming for. That's what we did. I mentioned it to my wife that we pay a premium to live in Hoboken. Yes, because $2,600 a month is not cheap. I know many times this corporate lobbyist will say, well, this is because there's people who are paying $600 a month. Listen, I don't know who's paying $600 a month on rent. God bless them. But that's not the case. If they don't want to be generalized in terms of who are good landlords or bad landlords, then they shouldn't generalize on who is benefiting from rent control. Truth is that 70% of people in Hoboken are renters, are tenants, and benefit directly or indirectly from rent control, from rent protections. If they come after rent control tenants, guess who's next is the non-rent control tenants. You have your church towers, you have your clock towers, you have your Marine View Plazas of the world here in Hoboken, and yes, it's all out for grabs. They're coming after all of us. That's why we're all showing up. When they come after one of us, we all show up. That's the Hoboken way. So I want to be very clear. On November 5th, we have to vote no on the question on the ballot. This is a general election. Everybody's going in to vote for president. This is our opportunity to also vote for our neighbors. The character of Hoboken is its people. It's the people that you see at Bue outside just having a conversation, or outside of Empire Coffee, right? In Hoboken, it's the people with the families that go out and drop off their kids at school, that are using our school district, our public schools, that are revitalizing our public schools every single year with new ideas, new energy. It's the seniors, right, that live in Hoboken that cannot afford to a rent increase of 20%, 40%, which is what the corporate landlords have been asking for based on this referendum. It's the families that, yes, some of them are young professionals, but not all of us. Um, but even then, I mean, like I said earlier, I pay $2,600 for rent for a 2-bedroom apartment. Am I blessed? Yes. Do I want more people to be benefiting from that? Yes. Am I paying very little? No. But the truth is, my landlord has the protections to be able to make this sustainable. He is able to pass down to me any increase in taxes that he gets from property taxes. He's able to, after I'm gone, to increase the rent by 25%. Why would they want to raise the rent by an unlimited amount? If they keep saying that they don't want to kick anybody out, they don't want to pressure tenants into leaving, then why the rush for the ability to raise the rent as much as they can after a tenant leaves? A landlord the other day said, "Why should I care about the tenant? I want to in other words, I want to make as much money as possible. Why should I care about the tenants?" Well, right back at you. Then why should we care about the landlord? If you don't care about us, why should we care about you? You know why? Because that's the decent thing to do. Of course we don't want you to go broke. Of course we want you to be sustainable. But not at the expense of price gouging people. Not at the expense of increasing somebody's rent by 20%, which has happened in Hoboken plenty of times, by $1,000, by $2,000 per month. It's tough for a family to come up with $1,000, $2,000 per month. The average person, I think I saw an article about the average family in America is not able to maneuver through a $500 emergency. $500 emergency, and you want to increase people's rent by $1,000, by $2,000? You know, it's, again, this is an important vote. I hope everyone shows up. I hope it's clear that by voting no, we're protecting tenants. We're keeping the rules, and any rule and any law can be improved. But this ain't it. This is not it. Thank you for listening to the Change Podcast. My name is Ron Bautista, and you can follow us at Ron Bautista NJ on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter. You can follow us on TikTok, and you can also catch the podcast at all your platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as well as my YouTube channel. You can go directly also to ronbautistanj.com/thechange and make sure you hit the subscribe button. You make sure you follow us. You make sure you send us your questions. Let us know who else is making a change in your community and who should we be having a conversation with next. Thank you so much. Seguimos. Ciao.